Okay, so welcome to Coach Jon Wyse. Hi, John.
Hi, Simon.
This is part two because we had a bit of an interruption. So I'm really interested in speaking to you about sort of coaching in general rather than defensive coaching. And whilst it isn't new at them, it's probably pretty old now. And I know a lot of coaches, especially on Twitter, are talking about making activities game specific, having triggers, sort of players making decisions rather than being robotic. I wonder if you could give me an overview on that. And I know it's a
Yeah,
lot.
well, yeah, but I'm thinking about this today because you shared with me kind of a context, and just thinking about it this evening. I think probably a year ago, prior to the COVID pandemic and prior to lots of stuff being online, and in reflection on a lot of the podcasts I was listening to when I was out on the road doing my work and doing quality assurance visits, I think I would say there's two magic words, and the two magic words are it depends. Um, I think actually there are three magic words, and the three magic words are either it depends because, or, and I've forgotten what this was, it depends as. So you actually give a context to what you're talking about. So I think any discussion about representativeness, making things game-like, has to be embedded in a context that you can create a mental model of, a mental picture of, or you've got an image of, or actually one that you can actually go, I can take this scenario and put this into a specific context, but then I can translate that and you know, almost like take the principles of that to other contexts. So I actually think, and I had this conversation with someone the other day about, if you want, so there's an S&C coach who's doing a lot of stuff around American football at the moment that's recently joined our community. And I think he's considering playing. I think his Facebook status the other day gave hints that he was playing. And the conversation I had with a friend was, I hope he goes and plays defense, because developing strength and conditioning when you're in a relatively closed decision-making loop, in the sense of, I'm a wide receiver, I can see from my pre-snap vision that they are likely to play a certain coverage or alignment. I'm going to run my route like this, and then you kind of, not that you switch off, but you aren't making ongoing decisions. Whereas on defense, I think the decisions you're making, and I'll clarify what I mean by decision making in a moment, are continual, and you're constantly refining your actions as a result of decisions that you're making, or invariably, sometimes you're not, and I think that possibly second category goes into two sub brackets, where you do the right thing because you've got an instinct and you just don't know why you're doing it, or you do it regardless because you've been drilled into doing it that way, and your body has followed that neural message, that kind of muscular message, that motor pathway, that motor program, to actually say, in this context, I will do this no matter what. And then at some point, because I've been there, you kind of go, oh, hold on, my opponent has actually done something different to what I expected. oh, crikey, I need to make a decision and act in a different way. So I think, the defensive side of the ball, I think, allows you for better representativeness, but I think it equally then makes it really, really complex. So it depends, because it's really, really complex. And for me, kind of going down that route of, you come to a junction, you make a decision based on this info or this info, and you go in a series of directions. It's almost sort of saying, what does that flow chart look like? And And perhaps if I reverse back up for a second and sort of say, you know, for me, based on some stuff I've read and some stuff I've read recently, looking at my bookshelf up there in terms of looking for the name of the book, Doug Lemov, who's done some stuff around teaching, has written a book for sports coaches. And in his sports coaching book, and I'm just trying to frantically see where I've put it. I put it on a different shelf, I think. He talks about the difference between decision making and problem solving, because I think we use the language interchangeably, and there is an overlap. He talks about decision making being that in the moment decision you make to act in a certain way, whereas problem solving is kind of what we see in football, where at the end of a defensive series, let's keep it in that context, you go to the sideline and you get the chalkboard out, or you explain to a coach what you've seen and what they've done, or a coach explains to you what they did, and you either chalkboard it up, you put it on a whiteboard, or you know, in some instances, obviously a higher level, you look at Polaroid digital images of pre, during, and post-snap sort of pictures. So for me, the decision-making aspect of being in the game is really what I think is where the representativeness comes from. Because, you know, I heard this on a call the other night, you know, on defense in particular, from the front back to the coverage at the back, you know, we don't know whether it's run or pass. We don't know whether it's going to go left, middle, or wherever. The offense has that potential advantage over us. So we are not necessarily reading and reacting, but we have an ability to plan and be proactive in our actions, to be disruptive, to stop the ball gaining yardage. But equally, we perhaps need to be able to respond. And I again, probably, you know, trying to have some precision with language, I would prefer to read and respond than read and react. Because for me, you know, the doctor gave me some medicine because I was ill the other day. I reacted to it, compared to the doctor gave me some medicine the other day and I responded to it. I think, you know, that one small change in word denotes two different negative and positive outcomes. So I think there's an element of responding to the display, the environment, the stimuli in front of us, or the stimulus singular in front of us, and going, I'm going to change my movement because I have seen this thing happening. If I can back up a little bit and give people a bit of time to digest that, I think the thing that needs to be set in context, and, you know, I think this is something that has come across in some of the conversations you've had previously, and there's no criticism of anybody, is I always kind of try and revert back to first principles. And for me, the first principle, when one talks about coaching, is, what is my approach? What is my philosophy? And without getting into that, because we could probably spend hours discussing that, or I could probably spend hours talking at you about that, about that. I think it's important to self-reflect and be self-aware enough to identify what one's philosophy is as a coach. So I've taken an approach based on my experience and based on being able to be in and around other really effective coaches in a multitude of different sports due to the job that I do, is that I've got an approach where I'm actually looking to try and make myself fairly redundant. And a couple of years ago, when I was head coach of a team, you know, I would quite openly, having shared that philosophy that may or may not have been received and understood very well at differing levels, you know, I was quite comfortable saying to the team, look, if that's the only decision I make in terms of taking a timeout because of the momentum of the game, or because I've seen something, or because I want to question something, or I want to, you know, have a discussion with officials, and that becomes a pivotal moment, then I've done my job. That's, you know, I literally want to get to a point, if I was going to be with the team long term, where I would literally rock up on a game day, you know, do all the the less glamorous stuff, like picking up bags, helping with water. I'd be the get back coach too. I'd be the one asking about time on the clock, checking with the referees, doing all that official head coach stuff. But equally, I would give a lot of the decision making and the problem solving over to others. And again, I guess it's the understanding of what exactly that looks like at its ultimate level, but equally what it looks like as you're trying to build towards that. And I certainly would never say that I've got to that nirvana point, but I would certainly say that my philosophy is trying to build towards making myself redundant. So going back to talking about defense, if I want the players to make good decisions, good or bad, because I understand that there's a development process to playing the sport because of the level that we compete at. It's not, jobs on the line, personal security, personal finance at stake. Perhaps there's less pressure, but I think if I'm trying to get players to make decisions, I have to try and give them tools in which to make good decisions. And part of that is, from a defensive perspective, them understanding, and this goes back to something that I don't think we necessarily talk about in coach education, coach qualifications, is what are we trying to do on defense? What's our main goals, and how do we then go about doing them? And for me, without sort of adding an element of debate here, it's obviously deny points. Well, the first principle is score points, because we have, and again, not a phrase I've heard recently, but I would say the ball. If we can get the ball, then I'm happy as a defensive-based coach, defensive-focused coach, because then mostly our opponents aren't scoring, and that makes the other side of the ball, their job and our kicking game's job, slightly easier if we've got the ball, if we're in possession. So I want us to score, and obviously scoring might involve getting a safety as well, whatever that looks like. We want to stop them from scoring. We want to stop them from gaining yardage, and we obviously want to, ultimately release them off possession of the ball. So I'm trying to get the ball back. I'm trying to score points. I'm trying to stop them gaining yardage. But the yardage one, again, not that it's a bend but don't break philosophy, but I'm okay with giving up yardage if we're making good decisions, and ultimately we're sometimes setting them up to give us the ball, to allow us to get the ball from them. So that's kind of the problem solving that I put in front of players. How do we do that? And then for me, the single biggest decision that players face on defense is to diagnose whether it's a run or a pass. And you and other coaches listening to this have been on enough calls where we hear offensive based coaches talk about, who's the defender in conflict, who's got a run pass read. For me, as I put my defensive structure into place, I want to give people, based on alignments that we face and based on our call, and down and distance, obviously, so it is situation specific. I want players to understand, am I a run first defender or am I a pass first defender? So that instantly they've got that split second to program in a response that involves a thought out decision. So they're problem solving prior to the ball being snapped. Then they can execute that, see what's going on, and then use their vision to decide how to respond, how to act accordingly based on the scene that unfurls in front of them. So for me, structuring a defense and saying, right, on this down and distance, in this formation and play call, I am either a run first defender or I'm a pass first defender. Knowing that, again, we have no idea what the offense is gonna call, and arguably sometimes neither does the offense. And again, that's how obviously modern offense is kind of evolving. So we have to play to what we see, and respond accordingly. So that for me is important. So if I take it to the context that you kind of explained to me prior to us coming on the call about defensive backs backpedaling, because that might allow people to go, there's a specific example, and I can relate that to, you know, a defensive tackle in a 3-tech who is pursuing a run away or a run towards or an outside run or, you know, drop back pass or a rollout pass or whatever else. So the pass rush element or the run defense element is let's set that partly to the side, but let's acknowledge that part of the game is half the tree, because if it's a run, you know, then essentially all of us on defense become run first defenders. So as soon as that ball crosses the line of scrimmage in possession of the ball carrier, we're all run first defenders. So anything I might say to my cornerback about cover 3 and their responsibilities there, forget those. They've got the ball. In my defensive philosophy, you are either a force tackler or a spill tackler, primarily, but then it depends. That adjusts according to the position on the field, how close to the sideline you are, how close to the middle of the field you are, obviously the position relative to other teammates as well. So if 3 of us are, you know, outside and we all might consider ourselves to be force tacklers, somebody, the innermost player, has to weigh up the situation very quickly and make the decision, actually, I'm going to be the spill tackler, and almost, you know, change their relationship with the ball carrier so that they take the inside away. And you know, and if they do cut back, then that's their responsibility to make the tackle, or it's their responsibility to make the play to spill the ball carrier out to the other tacklers, you know. So I guess we're looking at the other half of the tree that says it's a pass play, and then we go to the quarter of the tree that says I'm not a pass rusher trying to stop the pass at the source of the quarterback or whoever the designated thrower is. I'm in pass coverage, you know, and whether that's man-to-man zone or, you know, we're in a mixed combination coverage, that's obviously the action that I then follow. So for me, not ignoring that, I think it's really important that as you're setting up coaching activities, that your activities give players the ability to respond to the display, the things that they can see outside of their person, and actually go, it's unpredictable. Whilst I'm a pass first defender and I'm a pass coverage defender as a defensive back, I need to be aware that it may also be a run, and I need to be able to make the decision to abandon my pass responsibilities and come and play as a force tackler or a spill tackler, you know, and to help the defense make the play. So I think what we miss is we miss that unpredictability, and we instantly go, we're just going to work on a quarter of the tree, you know. Every single play, though, as far as I'm aware from my experiences in watching the game and playing the game, every single play as a defensive player, I don't know whether it's run or pass, and I've got to make that diagnosis regardless. You know, you could argue, you know, when we've played that team who are run heavy team and it's 4th and goal on our -1 yard line, they're going to run. You know, they're in a double tight end set, 2 backs. I'm out on their 1 receiver. Yeah, it's pretty much going to be a run, but I've still got to make that decision. And obviously I'm playing pass first because I'm not going to be really effective against the run, you know, with the receiver split out. So, but I think we miss a trick by not having that stimulus and not having that that thing in the display that puts the defender in that kind of that decision-making process. So, you know, so thinking about this, how I would structure this in a session is I almost need to remember as I'm putting together my activities that I need to give a run pass read at some point, even though I might be saying this is a pass first activity, because if I chop off the tree and take away that first decision, then I'm actually putting all my players at a disadvantage, because I'm saying do this when it's a run, but I'm not teaching them to understand and to perceive and to make the decision, oh, it's a run or it's a pass, you know. And you know, how many times have I been there as a coach where I've gone to a player, didn't you see it was a run play? And the player goes, no, I didn't. And I've, you know, gone, but it was obvious. Whereas nowadays, I think I would go to a player, my question would be, what did you see? And if the player goes, coach, I was locked up on the receiver, so I was, you know, watching his hip buckle, his you know, and watching his hip or his buckle of his belt and just following him down the field, I'd be going, well, okay, in this scenario, because it's 3rd and 1 and they're a run heavy team, and our scout has said, you know, they like to run a lot, you just need to put your, and because of the coverage, you just need to put yourself in a position where you can sneak a peek, play pass first, because that's, you know, what we've got you to do, but you need to be aware that it might be a run. And actually, because you didn't see that, you weren't able to help us make the play on that last play, you know, which to me is a different mindset from, we all knew it was a pass. And it's like, well, yeah, but coach, you're standing on the sideline and you can see that, and you're not having to try and run with someone with restricted view out of a helmet and the fatigue of playing the game, you know, on a hot sunny day, and there's, you know, not a lot of water around, and I'm dehydrated, and, you know, and my brain is a bit frazzled anyway, you know, because that's the reality of what it's obviously like from a player's situation. So, yeah, so the question is, what did you see? And then what did you decide as a result of that? And again, you know, I think I found, as I've asked players that, and I've got one instance in the game a couple of years ago where I actually called our defensive captain over sort of post the play. It was near our sideline, and said, you know, what did you see on that play? You know, and he was like, well, I saw this. And I was like, okay, brilliant. And he was like, aren't you going to tell me off? And I went, no, because what you did was a direct result of what you saw. I just wanted to check what you saw, because you made such a great play. I almost want, you know, and part of it was out loud to you know, praise you for going through the process that I've talked about, and you know, and hopefully helped you to start to understand a bit better. So I'm not coaching you because you make mistakes. I'm not there to be an error detector and an error corrector. I want to be able to be empathetic to your scenario in a game and see the game through your eyes. And if I can see it through your eyes as to what you're looking at, then I can perhaps give you better information to help you see better, you know. And again, I think, thinking about this afternoon before we hooked up on the call, you know, a lot of the time, and it was spoken about on a call the other night, you know, we talk about foot placement, we talk about hand placement, and probably everyone on the call knows where I'm going with this. And we have the discussion, which is more important, foot placement or hand placement? Well, what about eye placement? Is that potentially more important than both of those? Because, you know, if you aren't looking at the right things in your environment, then what your hands or feet do make little sense, because you're just doing them automatically without responding to what the offense are doing. So for me, it's obviously making sure that you've got the run pass conflict in there, but then also going, what does a game look like? And again, you know, it's classic things like defensive backpedaling. I can remember coming to Hertfordshire Uni probably on a Wednesday night, as I was doing a visit down to probably a judo club in East London, and it was on the drive on the way home. And suddenly, because the coach hadn't been able to make it, and you were running the defense, and obviously I know Jim Messenger, who was head coach at the time, Jim and you going, John, do you want to take defensive backs? And it's like, oh, okay. So my first question to them is, what do you normally do? I'm here as a guest coach and I'll give you some insights, but I'm not going to, give you some magic pills, pearls of wisdom that are going to transform your game, but let me facilitate what you normally do. So you're relatively comfortable. And then, and the first drill is, well, I'll stand in front of you. You stand in front of us, coach. You tell us to go back and we'll backpedal. And it's like, oh, well, okay. But how about this? How about I go off to the side slightly and I do a movement of the ball, or I get the next DB to line up as a receiver and for them to just take 2 or 3 steps off the line, and then for you to backpedal off of that. And then when you are coming back and reacting to the ball moving, as I throw it to you at a 45-degree angle coming forwards, or a 90-degree angle to the sides, or 45 back, or 180 degrees turn and run back, or a zigzag, or whatever other fancy stuff you might want to do, the ball is coming from a position that's representative to the game. And then again, we can have the conversation as to, well, when would you, if you can picture this from where you're looking and where you're viewing this, if I'm the quarterback and to my right, which is this way, I think, well, that is my right hand, so I know this that way. To my right is where the receiver and the defensive back are. If the defensive back goes backwards and then comes forwards at a 45-degree towards me, my question is, what pass pattern are you likely to be covering where that is your break on a ball to make an interception or to make the tackle? So that then the player goes, right, okay, I recognize and I can start to associate the footwork pattern I'm doing and the movement pattern that I'm following to a potential stimulus. So we've established that connection without actually giving them the stimulus. And then at that point, once you've done that, obviously, I think it is then about saying, well, okay, I'm now going to, and this is where you might have and start to incorporate something called spacing into your practice. So again, it's a well-known teaching technique where you don't teach everything in blocks. You teach a bit of something, you go and do something else, you come back and do the same thing again. So you kind of distribute the practice is another term that's been used traditionally. So distributed practice. So it might be that you go, well, okay, so rather than just practice up and back in at 45 degrees 3 or 4 times, I might, in order to help you do the movement pattern and do the footwork technique and maybe the body position technique, and maybe there's not so much of a hand technique with that, although arguably you're still going to use your upper body to change your direction. I'm going to give you that in a closed environment, a predictable environment, but probably I want to give you lots of reps really quickly so that you can use your kinesthetic feedback to get a better feel of what it feels like to do that correctly. So for me, where practice becomes a bit messy and ugly is that actually I don't want my practice sessions and my activities to look orchestrated and, like choreographed. I want, potentially I want 3 defenders out there at differing depths, because again, we might line up against trips and we might be playing man coverage, and I want them to go, well, they're running triple slants, or they're running all in. So all 3 of them are doing 5 and ins. So I want you to replicate the footwork patterns from different depths, against no opponent for the time being, but I want you to create that image in your mind. But let's do that 3 times in a row with you 3 DBs, and then let's flip out and do another. And I'm not going to correct you on the first go, because I want you to try and problem solve to figure out what you did wrong. Because, how many times have we been there where we've gone to a player and gone, you took a step back, you took a full step, and the player goes, yeah, I know. And it's like, okay, so what have I actually given to the player there? My input is redundant. I might be better going, did you notice what happened to your feet? And the player goes, I took a full step. Yeah, I did. I took a full step. Okay, great. That's what I saw too.
Yeah.
Do I need to coach them? Do I need to tell them not to take that? Because they've, you know, by the use of their language, they said it was a false step. Okay, right. So let's go again. They correct it. Okay, good. Let's then test it to see if it comes up the third time. Okay, so there's no false step on the third time. That's great. But again, is that game like? Are the offense going to go and line up and run the same play 3 times in a row? Probably not. Arguably, I've been on a team where we've done that because it's been successful and they haven't been able to stop us. But then from a defensive perspective, you know, I probably need to maybe think about how I respond to that. So what I want to then do is I then want to come back and retest that, almost without telling them that that's the question I'm going to ask them. You know, and I had this analogy, and I was talking to my daughter in the car last week as I took her to dancing lessons, and you know, we have these lovely conversations that I'm sure she, when she's older, will go, my dad kept asking me these questions every time we're in the car, and I don't know what he was trying to do, but it's just like, Dad, just give me a break. I'm about to go dancing. And it's questions like, you know, what's halfway between 6 and 7? This is a real situation that occurred, so I'm not making this up. Halfway between 6 and 7, and she worked it out. And the way she worked it out was that she established that the process was to add 6 and 7 together, which is 13, and then divide by 2, because she's been doing that in her school math lessons. So, okay, it's like, right, okay, so what's, you know, so I've repeated the question, repeated the problem. What's halfway between 6 and 7? 6.5. What's halfway between 6 and 7? 6.5. Right, okay, she's got that. Okay, so what's halfway between 5 and 8? So essentially the different problem, but same solution. She was able to go 6.5. What's halfway between 4 and 9? 6.5. Okay, right. What's halfway between 1 and 8? Now, 6.5 is not the answer, you know, and I'll give you a moment to think about what it is, and I'm not going to put you on the spot and test you, but what I've done there is I'm testing your process, not looking for the same solution. So I need to make sure that by distributing the practice, by having some interleaving, and these are some sort of teaching terms that people watching might want to, and yourself might want to go away and have a look at. There's a great book, bit of product placement, called Teaching Rebooted, by a guy who some of the people on watching this might recognize, John Tate, who used to coach at the Wooden Warriors school-based team, flag and contact team. So John is the deputy head of a learning trust in North Yorkshire, and I think that's about his 4th or 5th book. He'll tell me off for not knowing exactly, but there's some great stuff on spacing and interleaving in that I think is really accessible. And again, you know, people can either, there's loads of stuff on the net that's free. Obviously, you need to buy John's book, which is quite fairly priced. Not that I'm on commission, but I'll just get that one in. And JT, if you're watching, I'll have a free copy of your next book, please. So I want to set up the practice so that whilst I do give my players that predictable problem solving, they know what the answer is, I want it to look like a game. So I want them to, having gone and done their backpedaling, where they backpedal for 5 and then come back at 45, go out at 45, go laterally at 90 both ways, go diagonally backwards at 45, or turn and do a 180 spin and cover that. I want them then to face a receiver who's obviously being conditioned not to aggressively, that's the wrong term, not to assertively contest the catch, because this is for the defensive back primarily, you know. Again, knowing that I haven't given them the option to diagnose whether it's a run play, which again, I'm going to come back and go, well, what did you do on that play? Well, did you not see me pitch the ball out? Well, yeah, coach, I just thought you made a mistake then. Okay, that's fine. what would you do in a game though? Oh, well, I would do this. And then it's the, you know, the obvious of, well, okay, from now on, let's pretend this is a game. So I'm going to have a ball carrier back here potentially every single time to give you that conflict, to test you on that response, because that's the other half of the tree. But in terms of my receiver, I would then want my receiver to run a non-predictable pass route that matches those solutions that we've gone through, but not in a way that all my defenders know this is about repeating the drop back pedal and forwards at 45 degrees, because I want them to be able to diagnose what it is that gives that route away. You know, whether it is the stem release that the receiver's got, whether it is a body position, whether it is the frequency of their running cadence, whether it's anything else that gives it away, you know, that they're doing that. And again, for me, the questions that I would want to ask as a coach is, what did you notice? Which is probably a bit more open than what did you see? Because, you know, sometimes when, and again, this probably is more generalizable to those positions in close contact with offensive players. Sometimes what I notice is I feel pressure on my shoulder, or I feel the man lean into me because we're in press man coverage, or because I'm the 3 tech trying to fight through a double team. Okay, so it's what do I notice? And then what did I decide to do as a result of that? So I think, like I said, it's a really complex, and it becomes really quite messy because the players don't know what's coming. But that's the game, isn't it? We don't know what's coming. We can, with a high degree of predictability, sometimes anticipate what is coming based on a scout, based on, you know, a pre-game video review, but we don't know for sure. So I think, you know, for me, it's about setting up practice to kind of go, how can I replicate that as often as I possibly can? And that is a little bit about going, not necessarily rip up the structure we've got or rip up the drills we've got, but going, how do I make this more representative? You know, how do I make this drill, if we're calling it a drill, even better or even more game-like? And I think the thing that gets me now, and I reflect back on Jon Wyse from years prior and go, but I'd have all these cones laid out and they'd all be color coordinated. You know, nowadays, when I lay cones out, they are still color coordinated and they are still really organized, but they are the sideline. They are, you know, so we, on the facility that we practiced at, we actually turned our field so it was, rather than going lengthways, because it wasn't quite wide enough to safely have a full width pitch, the 53 1/3 yards, we turned ours going across the pitch. So essentially we were probably using about 2/3 of the field, and had essentially a 40-yard playing field with 2 9-yard end zones, which again, you know, the level we played was kind of some quite familiar to the end zone distances we had, you know. But it allowed me then, with player help, to mark off designated points on the field to say, this is the yard line. So this is 10 yards out from the goal line, because if you're in the middle of the field, and I know this isn't a cue you would get on a normal football field, we're on the edge of the center circle. So there's 10 yards from the top of the center circle to the goal line, which if you think about it, that makes sense, because the next 10 yards takes you to the middle of the field. You replicate that 10 yards and 10 yards, there's your 40-yard field. But then we would use certain lines on the pitch, the top of the penalty box as a sideline. We would use then, you know, there was a blue line that was for one of the 5-a-side pitches that served as our top of the numbers. So that was 9 yards in. There was another set of lines that was just slightly further than 11 yards further, which is where you'd have the hash marks. So again, I'm sure everyone knows, or maybe they don't, that there are 20 yards from the hash marks to the sideline. So my cone designation was all about landmarks on the field. And so that I could say, with a high degree of game specificity to players, where are you in relation to the sideline? Because again, in some situations, particularly dealing with defensive backs, maybe making more tackles in the open field, what's your relationship to the sideline? Because that's our best tackler. That never misses, or rarely misses, depends upon the officials you get. So be aware of that. And again, be aware of the receiver. Conversely, be aware of where the receivers are aligned. Because if they're aligned, below the bottom of the numbers, so within 6 yards of the sideline, which you can visually kind of get a feel for, but you certainly know where the 9-yard marker is, then don't even bother with getting in an outside alignment. Yes, we play cover 3, we call cover 3, and you're a pass first defender and you've got the deep third and you've been told don't let them get outside of you, so bracket them inside. But actually, and we'd have all seen this on NFL practice fields and college practice fields, if they're 5 yards from the sideline, then actually we want to play an inside coverage against them, because I want to force the ball over the top of my head. And, again, just my philosophy. I had this discussion with a coach the other week. If they, and he disagreed with me, which is fine, if they complete that pass, well done them. But I'm gonna apply another principle that I advocate as a football coach. Put yourself between the ball and your opponent. And, which applies to blocking, which applies to tackling sometimes. If you can dislodge your opponent from the ball, then that's great. Which applies to, all sorts of things in terms of like a receiver trying to get open and getting into a clear lane for a completed pass. A defender getting in the way to make an interception as well. But if I can do that as an outside corner on cover 3 and they drop it in that 5-yard bucket down the sideline, then okay, that happens, and we see that happen at all levels. And I'm not gonna, jump on a defensive back's back, metaphorically rather than physically, because they've got beaten deep. Because it's happened to me once or twice, or slightly more than that. I'm sure anyone watching this who's seen me play will go, "Yeah, John, I remember that play you got beat deep on." And it happens. I'm not unique in that one. So for me, those cones are more about indicating landmarks on the field, and then it becomes a game of that decision making aligned with. And I'm gonna narrow it down from self-awareness of what I observed, what I noticed, and what I saw, to what I did, to also where was I when I did it. So in this part of the field, do I do it differently because I'm in that part of the field? And again, we all know this as defensive coaches, or potentially we do. My coverage as a pass first defender, my cushion gets compressed the closer I get to my own goal line, in theory, because I don't want to give up that catch in front of me, because because they've got yardage, and they might catch it in the end zone, and I can't tackle them there. I can't tackle them, to make any impact on the result of the play. So again, it's just understanding that. And again, for me, my questions to players are, what did you notice? What decision did you make? And then did you do it to the best of your ability? Did you do it with full effort and intensity? And if you can answer all of those as a player, and you still got the play wrong, then I'm not going to say, well, that's on me, because ultimately it's them that didn't execute the play. But I am going to acknowledge that perhaps I need to give them a better way of interpreting the information and interpreting the display around them, which, I guess links back to, and I appreciate I'm a bit sort of scattergun here, and hopefully people and you are kind of following, is how I then do what a guy called Mark Bennett, who runs a company called PDS Coaching, talks about a hot review, which is an almost instantaneous, straight after the moment, straight after the play review, compared to a cold review, which I might do via film. Obviously, I might share film on a platform like Zoom or Facebook Live and do a review with a player or players. What I would always do in that review, the cold review, is I would try and put myself in the player's shoes and ask them, what did you see from this on this play? What did you notice on this play? You know, and or, you know, when I'm doing this review, which again I've kind of pushed to players to initiate in a lot of instances. You know, does that make me a bad coach? I think it just makes me a different coach for the purists watching. Is I will go, you know, players, if you want me to review the film, because of the time I have, and because of maybe the relative importance that we collectively as a team attach to football, without saying to them, we're not that serious about it. We're serious when we're there. But, you know, if I have players turn around to me and go, John, I can't watch film during the week because I've got a job and 2 children, then I'm going to kind of go inside my head, well, so have I. I'm prioritizing football ahead of some of those things, which is my personal decision. If you're not, that's perfectly fine. But equally, I'm not then going to spoon feed you. So if you want me to do a video review of your play, don't ask me the question that all players ask, what do you think of my play today, coach? Because we've all been there and gone, and we've given some fob off answer to sort of say, well, you were really good. Or we might go, on this particular play, you were really good because you did this really well. Because I noticed that, because I was looking at that above anything else at that moment. And maybe I got a bit lucky as a coach that I can recall that. But what I want players to do is I want them to come back to me 2 or 3 days later and go, can you have a look at play 57 on the playlist, which was a good one. In fact, they normally say, can you look at my bad ones? Because that's what everyone wants. Again, everyone wants me as a coach to be an error detector and corrector. Can you look at this bad play? My response is only if you also provide me with a good play. And then I'm doing a comparison of the two. Hopefully there's some similarities between them, but that the player can then see that the good play is within reach. So again, it's a bit of mental modeling and confidence building for the player. But the process that I do when I go through film review in that regard is I will talk through, and this probably hasn't been as interactive like a Zoom chat can be. You know, it's been a Facebook Live where I'm responding to a text response in the chat. Maybe is I'm going, I think you, the player. So I'm just looking at my list of. So I think I've got Wendy on my list of names that I've messaged today. So Wendy, one of my former colleagues. So Wendy, I think you, which I could be coaching female footballer. That's fine. So Wendy, I think you looked at this and saw this based on your head movement, and based on the head movement that actually wasn't just a quick move of your head. It was actually a pause, and watching it in real time, you look in that, or you're faced in that direction for a good amount of time. So I think you were looking at that picture there and trying to make sense of it. And if you were looking at that compared to my recollection of that play, which actually I think has become far better when I stand back and try and take in the whole thing, and obviously I'm more detached in a head coach's position because I'm not worried about what's the next play that I'm running. And again, because of my coaching approach, is I can remember that vaguely, and what I saw flow this way, or I saw movement there, or I saw the receivers crossing. So I anticipated this kind of pattern combination from my experience, sat on the sideline in my comfy chair, not having to run around as I talked about earlier. But what I think you saw, Wendy, might have been this. And if you're in the chat, can you indicate that's what you saw? What I think you should be aware of is that your eye placement needs to look in this situation at these keys. So if you are lined up across from the number 2 receiver and you see them go out, knowing pre-snap where the number 1 receiver's aligned, are you then anticipating them crossing? So, and how then does that impact the coverage that we operate if we're in man or zone? Because again, we might switch if we're in man. We obviously change responsibilities if we're in zone, if we're playing some kind of, pattern match or zone, man zone combination. So again, for me, it's about trying to get players to understand the decisions they're making in the context of the game and the specific game scenarios. And hopefully, again, understanding the decision tree, the decision-making process tree, so that they can then apply that to other situations.
Okay.
And so that I'm not then going, and again, I think I heard this on a call the other day, watch the pass, watch the run, watch the screen, watch the draw, watch everything. I think it's an NFL Films clip from the 80s or maybe from the early 90s that I probably remember sitting on a coach to various games in Europe and having them on the VHS player, which for the kids watching this, go and ask your parents what VHS player is. But again, I'm not going to tell you all those situations, because whilst I might be able to, from my experience, when I have done that in the past and I've given you all the solutions to all the questions, as a player, you feel bad because you've been given everything and you can't remember. So you get frustrated. As a coach, I feel bad because I've taught you, but you can't remember. So now I've kind of taken a different approach where it's a case of, I want you to better understand the process of making those decisions. And then I want you to apply it hypothetically to the situations that you might see. And the ultimate one step away, one step removed is, can you almost talk me through what you would do on another play? Or can you then talk me through your good play and tell me why it was good? And not, because I made the tackle. It's, because I saw this, the receiver came off at this angle. They did an inside or an outside release. They did an inside release. There was a number 2 receiver that was lined up 5 yards away to start off with, who's their main receiver. I saw my receiver go inside. That made me think number 2 is coming outside because of the field boundary alignment. Therefore, I dropped my coverage because I didn't think the ball would be thrown that way. And it was third and 1. And I'd read that it was passed because I'd had a quick sneaky peek and I saw the line gave me a relatively clear picture of high shoulder, high hands, high hat. Therefore, they were dropping into pass protection. So I was relatively confident it was pass. I'm a pass first defender anyway. Therefore, I abandoned number 1, focused on number 2, saw the QB, took a quick peek, saw the QB's left hand coming off the ball. They were looking in that direction. And I just played catch with them, beat the receiver to the catch point, caught it, made the interception, and then fell over. Brilliant. Because what have you done? You got the ball. Okay, you didn't score, but you got the ball. Well done. We reward that. And actually, what I want you to be able to do as a player is to go, that's what it looks and feels like and sounds like, and all the other sensory representations when I make the right decisions. My aim is to try and replicate that. And again, the only way I can replicate that in practice is to put my players, as a coach, I could put my players in situations where they have to go through that decision-making process. The nirvana step that actually is the big thing is, I don't just want them to tell me, and again, I've done this quite a lot over the last couple of years, is where a player starts to verbalize the the actions and decisions they're making in the scenario that they're describing, I'm like, right, Craig, okay, you've got it, great. Don't tell me anymore. Or if they look like they're about to tell me that they've got the right answer, and I can see that on their face, because we know what we're all like, we've got the right answer, so we go, coach, it's, and I'm like, don't tell me, show me, because again, ultimately, in sport, my understanding of sport, and I wrestle with this given what I do for my paid employment, and I work in education on a sports course, as you know, but others on the call watching this might not know, is whilst I do want them to understand and have knowledge and have understanding, ultimately I want them to execute the skills. And if a player turns around and goes, I have no idea what I did then, my response is, well, okay, that's fine, because you did you got the ball. Well done. I'll work with you to try and help you develop that understanding. But right now, you're doing the right things to keep on. And again, how many of us know of, I guess, anecdotally and probably in person, players we've coached who just made plays. They don't have a clue what they do. They don't know the playbook. They just make it up as they go along based on a natural instinct. It's maybe not quite natural or instinctual, but they just go on, that looks right, so I just did it. And how many of us have kind of ridden the tails of those gifted players and kind of gone, I must be a pretty good coach, but the reality is they're just a really good player. I've done that. I'm guilty of doing that on those rare occasions where I have really, really good players. Apologies to anyone I've coached, but on those teams where we.
And some of the really great players, that's why they make terrible coaches, because they just don't know why they do it.
Well, I recall you writing it wasn't a blog back then, but I remember you writing something about that quite a while ago and sharing that. I've got a Word document somewhere in my archives that you wrote about being a good player doesn't necessarily make you a good coach. And you're entirely right. And that's what the evidence, the research sort of literature tells us, without getting too academic. But it is exactly that. It is about, do you understand the process, and can you explain that and get your players to understand it? Or again, are you comfortable enough as a coach to facilitate development, but equally able to go, I have no real impact on the performance level of that individual, good or bad. And sometimes with those really elite players, my job is just to get out of the way and let them do it. But equally set them scenarios that do challenge them, but be aware that they might not come back with the intellectualized answer of, well, coach, I did this because I saw that, and that means on this down and distance, I should do that. The player gets up after making the great play and goes, well, that was pretty good, wasn't it? What did I do? Don't know what I did. And we go, that's all right. It's now, it's our ball. We got the ball. Doesn't matter. We could chat about that later.
I always remember, I think it was the Tennessee Titans coach went to the convention, and he pretty much gave that answer on how he coaches the wide receivers. He just like supports them, puts them in situations to push them.
Yeah, and I think again, going back to what I started off with, I think it's very much about, and appreciate that this is a journey that we're all on, and I'm still on. We're constantly refining our approach, our philosophy to how we coach, in line with the environment in which we're coaching and the players that we're coaching. And I guess I would challenge coaches watching this and players who want to be coaches in the future to kind of go, not necessarily to directly question it, although maybe that's an attribute, a trait, a personality, character, not a personality, maybe that's a characteristic, behavioral tendency I have, where I feel quite comfortable to question the way things are done, because I think I've got some other solutions that might work just as well. based on my experience. But I would always go, does it look like the game? Is it truly representative of the game? And then again, I'll throw one last kind of reference in there for people to go away and do some homework on, spot the teacher. Have a look at the work of Nikolai Bernstein and his work on hammer, on blacksmiths. How representative can you truly be? And I might just leave the question as open-ended and as relatively as vague as that, but I'd be quite willing to engage with anyone who comes back and says, well, I found out about Bernstein and his blacksmiths. I think I get how that relates to representativeness, because it depends, because, going back to those 3 words that I started off at the top of the call. So I think for me, that's probably as natural a pause as I might have at the moment.
That's brilliant.
I appreciate that I've gone a little bit technical and brought a little bit of hopefully some football specific scenarios in. But again, for me, the X's and O's bits and the technical movement parts are less important to the decision-making parts, because you can then get the players to self-reflect. And again, I think the human body is actually really well designed to self-correct and find efficient ways for them of moving. And again, you just have to go back and look at, and I'm guilty of sitting at home and getting distracted from some of my working from home based tasks. And watching some American football on various platforms, and kind of going, all of those defensive backs, watching a bit of Ronnie Lott and Charles Woodson, and who else was I watching? I wasn't watching Kenny Easley because he's a Seattle Seahawks player, but watching people like that and kind of going, even modern day DBs, they all look different, they all move different. They all perform at a really high level. So maybe there's not one technique. And again, my job, were I to be ever in a position to coach them, would be, if I was allowed carte blanche to coach the way I felt was most appropriate, I'm just going to talk to you about how comfortable does that feel, and try this, have a go at this, and then give it a chance to settle in and to see how it feels. But if it doesn't work for you, and if actually you go back to a pre-established movement pattern, then again, let's look at how we make that most as effective as we possibly can. And then again, I might bring in the proper sports scientists and talk about, well, let's do some strength and conditioning, physical work to adjust your flexibility, to adjust your I'm not quite sure what hip flexibility is and how you would actually measure it, but to adjust, the muscle balance around those joints so that you have a greater range of movement, to allow you to do things differently. Because again, I think I saw something the other day that sort of said, the problem is, it was probably a tweet, Andy Rylands, and I think there's loads of stuff that he is doing around vision, decision, action, around this, and he's been doing it for a number of years, so it's not anything he's just suddenly come out with. But he talked about running into a brick wall and saying his body wasn't flexible, and his physician said, well, because of the things you've done to your body in the last 10 years, it's adapted to that and responded in a way that's how it operates. It can't do the flexible, supple stuff because for the last 10 years you've trained it to do the battering ram stuff because of the way that the game was when he played. So I think that it's about coaching the players' decisions, because again, those are the things that ultimately we as coaches probably get most frustrated about. It's not, we don't necessarily drill down and go, you didn't put your foot in the right place. It's primarily you took the wrong angle because you made a decision to take the angle you did. And how can I help you to take the best angle in every single scenario possible, while I need to, inject a process into your brain, or to elicit a process where you're able to make those high-speed computations with intention at times, and to be able to go, well, this is why I did that, because I thought this, I was trying to predict what was going to happen, and I got it wrong this time, so I'm going to learn from it. I got it right this time, so I'm going to learn from it. And go from there.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Andy Ryland, and that he said something about a perfect practice you're never going to learn anything from. You need lots of mistakes, and I just thought that was brilliant. Yeah, and
yeah, it's about ugly practice. Not that you can only learn from mistakes, and I think that's again a bit of a dichotomy. Probably the wrong word, but that's a bit of a continuum that's an either and or. It's a bit too dichotomous for my liking, but you can learn from a variety of situations, and obviously you get the confidence developing aspects of being successful, because that's the strongest predictor of confidence. Self-confidence is your previous experience. If you've done it before, you can do it again, along with the persuasion from a coach. But yeah, I think it is about making, again, you look at the game. If you took the game and you said, and I had this conversation with a coach yesterday, I think it was. If you take the game and you go, let's drop that into a practice scenario. How do we put all of those bits into our practice and prepare for those? The game's really messy. The game's really disjointed. The game's really unpredictable.
Yeah. Usually the big plays are the most unpredictable and
Yeah,
messy.
well, yeah, and and again, I think I feel comfortable in saying this, and anyone who knows me will go, yeah, that's we anticipated that. The biggest plays I can remember making in my career so far, because I haven't quite retired yet, are where I've had a couple where I've done exactly as has been scripted by the coach. And in those occasions, there was an interception I got when I played for Bristol against the London Warriors back in around about 2010. And in that situation, everyone said to me, what a great play. And I went, no, I just followed what the coach had told us in our pre-game scout. And he did it correct, and that coach, you got that interception. I just made the play because I recognized that scenario that you described really well. That's not a great play by me. That's just great recognition by me to understand the scenario he's painted. That's great coaching. Yeah. There have been lots of other plays, and there's been lots of those, but not as many that are memorable, where I've made something up based on what I saw. So played in a final several years ago, and I can remember as a punter, so slightly different context, seeing that the opposing team had overloaded the right-hand side with numbers, and that was their sideline. And I can remember their coach kind of motioning to the defense, to the punt rush, to kind of overload that side, and thinking, but I'm left-footed, so actually that's the wrong side to overload, because I'm going to step away from it and still get the ball off, relatively safely if the snap's okay. And then looking up and going, but their number one athlete is this side. They want him one-on-one. They want him isolated, and they want me to go to him. So as I received the snap, it was a case of, as I brought the ball down, I could see this flash of opponent color. I won't name drop who it was.
I know.
Because although he might be coaching a team in Dallas at the moment. But as he came across, it's like, I can't punt this without getting it blocked. But my plan B, my other decision was, I've got a program as a get out in case this goes wrong here. So I tucked the ball away, scooted around the end, got a first down, and when I got off the ground and looked at my head coach, he was sort of smiled at me and went, well done, John. And then just went on with the rest of the game. For him, it was like, well, that's no surprise, is it? And then afterwards he was like, what made you do that? And it's like, well, I saw him coming, and that's a scenario. And probably people, again, who know me know I like to run fake punts, hopefully successfully in the right situation. I've run that on a 4th and 10 on our own 10-yard line. I've run that on when we were punting from our 15, a game in Austria in a European, not international game, but a European game, under floodlights on a Friday night on Austrian Sky Sports, where it's just like, this is a scenario, I'm making a decision and I'll live or die by it, with my teammates and coaches. But I've got the conviction to go, this is what I saw, therefore that's what I decided. And, hopefully I made more better decisions because I was making decisions. And again, I think my coaches gave me the freedom to kind of go, well, you generally make good decisions, John, so we'll let you have that, even though it gives us palpitations. And then I guess that's influenced my approach as a coach, because I can't turn around and say to my players, you have to run the play I call, because I want lots of Jon Wyse types out there who are making decisions. And if they all go, we ignored that play call because we saw something else, I'll go, well, okay, well, talk me through that at the appropriate time. And if they can provide a rationale for what they do based on their understanding of the game that I've hopefully helped them to develop, I'll go, yeah, okay, that was a sound decision. With the caveat, as we all do as coaches, but run my play because I'm trying to set something up for later. But, again, I guess with experience, I've kind of got a bit more chilled about it and gone, well, okay, that's fine, because if I think about other teams scouting us, they can scout Jon Wyse and my tendencies, but they can't scout the tendencies of 5 of my players and come to any logical conclusion as to what we're doing. So, if we're making them guess, as to what we're doing, because we don't have a top 5 go-to plays, because it's randomly chosen seemingly, but it's chosen based on a rationale based on what we see and the individual or collective decision makings. Yeah, I'll live with that, and I'm okay living with that. That I'm not in control of the game as much as 20 plus years ago Jon Wyse would have wanted to be. But again, that's just an approach that I take, which is not for everyone, but it's just an approach to consider. But yeah, going back to the point, and this will be the last thing I'd say, is it's looking at the game and going, how do I practice that in a practice scenario? And if I take the reverse and look at what I do in practice, my challenge to everyone out there is to take, and I'd love to do this at a face-to-face convention that is a workshop type thing, and go, draw up your best activity, make it more game-like, and let's share those and go, actually, this is a blocking drill that I do. How do you make it more game-like? And I think there was a post on Facebook about blocking sled, the other day. I don't know whether you saw. I know you haven't maybe had a chance to respond to it, but it's kind of like linebacker taking a false step. My response was, do they just need to start further back because they're trying to compensate about explosiveness by taking that false step to give them the run up and the momentum? Are they going to get contact after one step in a game? If they're a linebacker lined up on the line of scrimmage, then that's fine. That's the justification for that. But why are all your linebackers doing it? Because surely you're not, you don't have let's say you run a 40 defense. You don't have a 7-man on the line of scrimmage, do you? That with that team, probably not. They would probably be a bit more sound than that. So I would always go, look at your practice activities. How does that replicate the game? Do you, going back to DBs as a finish point, do you need your DBs doing the same thing at the same time? Because are they going to do that in a game? No, because we get them doing those movements and then going to one ball that's thrown in between them and then contesting it, which is fine, but we want collaboration rather than competition between our 2 players. Chances are in a game, they don't get to that interception point following the same path. So is it better to say, well, on this drill, I want you to imagine when we set it up at the first level that this is some kind of smash concept. So you're the outside backer, you're the deep corner. We're going to run a smash concept versus you. I'm going to throw the ball to either short or deep, and then you both turn and run to the ball wherever you are. It'll be nearer to one of you because chances are that's what the offense are going to try and do. They're not going to throw it equidistant between you. And you, the player that doesn't get it, I want you to take the appropriate actions, make the appropriate decisions as to what happens. And this is another conversation for another time, perhaps. What happens once we make that interception? Because that's not play over, and again, having seen a few videos today and yesterday of some DBs and receivers catching a ball and then slowing down and stopping, for me, that's when the action really starts, when you as a defensive player or a receiver have got the ball in your hands. That's the moment your play properly starts. I know it's not, that's where it properly starts, but that's where you then make the great plays. It's not, well, I ran a 5-yard slant and caught the ball. My coach did that. That was all on my coach. But I broke 5 tackles after that. That's on me. And again, I want my players to be the ones that are going, and I want to be the coach that's going, you made that great play. I just set up the call to give you the chance to make that great play.
That's perfect. I'm very mindful of your time, and I cannot thank you enough for all the time. Maybe we can set up a part 2 or something where we do work out, but thank you for illustrating some of my evolution, and you've gone even further from that. So that's perfect. Thank you, Jon. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Simon. Thanks a lot.